Good morning, I'm Dr. Jayalakshmi. Today I'm going to complete neonatal seizures. Okay. Last class, what we have learned? Breastfeeding. So when do we celebrate breastfeeding week? August first week. Okay. Then our topic is neonatal seizures. In this, I'm going to complete introduction, types of seizures, causes, diagnosis, management, and prognosis. Coming to introduction. First thing is we should know what is seizure. Seizure, it is defined clinically as a paroxysmal alteration in neurological function, that is, it can be motor, behavior, and or autonomic function. And then why we should know about seizures in neonates? Because if we won't treat seizures during newborn period, they may have permanent sequelae. They may land with cerebral palsy and intellectual disabilities also. And then newborn period is the most susceptible period in the whole human life. And then the incidence varies from 0.5 to 0.8% in term babies, and then 6 to 12% in babies weighing less than 1500 grams. Then coming to early diagnosis of neonatal seizures, why it is important. First thing is we have to identify and then treatment of underlying disorders, and then treatment to prevent additional seizures and seizure related systemic effects such as hypoxemia and hypertension. And then treatment of seizures to possibly prevent seizure related exotoxic neuronal injury. Then coming to electroclinical dissociation or uncoupling or EEG only seizures. So what is this EEG only seizures? First thing is we have to correlate with both video and EEG. Okay, it detects more than 80% of seizures, and then in this, most of them they are not associated with clinical peak of seizures. Okay, only there is EEG changes of seizure. Okay, other than that, there is no clinical change. So this is known as electroclinical dissociation. Actually, the significance of electroclinical dissociation is not yet known. We don't know whether they may promote further damage to brain or not. Is also it's still in under trials. Then coming to jitteriness. Before going to seizures, we should know what is jitteriness. Okay, it is most common in newborns. Mostly in 80% in term healthy newborns, it is seen. And then how do you differentiate between jitteriness and seizures? Jitteriness will differentiate by there is symmetrical tremors of extremities, okay, and its rate is around 5 to 6 per second. There is to and fro movement equal intensity, okay, whereas in case of seizures there is fast and slow component, okay. And then jitteriness is provoked by sonic and physical stimulus, and then jitteriness is decreased by passive flexion of that limb. And then there is no associated eye or facial movements or autonomic changes or EEG abnormalities in jitteriness. And then when jitteriness is there, you should rule out hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, hypoglycemia, hypercalcemia, polycythemia, and narcotic withdrawal syndromes. And then coming to types of seizures in newborn. In newborn, mostly we'll see only focal type of seizures. Okay, generalized tonic-clonic seizures like adults, they are very rare. Okay, why this GTCS is very rare in neonates? First thing is there is improper development of axons, dendritic process, and then arborization, and then there is delayed myelination. Okay, as a result of this, we can't see GTCS type of seizures. Developmental immaturity, it influences many aspects of diagnosis, management, and prognosis of seizures in the newborn. Clinical seizure patterns in the neonate reflect the reduced connectivity in the neonatal brain with prominence of focal ictal characteristics and rarity of generalized patterns of clinical seizures. And then there is a balance between excitatory and inhibitory, whereas in case of neonates, there is excitatory component is higher side. Okay, as a result, in newborns they are more prone to seizures. And then sometimes this GABA also, even though it's an inhibitory, it sometimes it promotes seizures. Okay, it acts like an excitotoxic. Next is systemic process are also immature, leading to altered drug handling compared to older children. In neonates, liver and kidney, they are immature. Okay. And then the immature brain may be more susceptible to developmental effects of anticonvulsant medications. In term babies, seizures, they are visible. Okay. In preterms, seizures, they are not easily differentiated. Okay. And then as the gestational age increases, the velocity of seizures also is increased. Coming to subtle seizures or motor automatisms. They account for 50% of all seizures, and these are more common in preterms. And there is jerking of eyes, blinking or fluttering of eyelids, staring look, sucking, chewing, smacking, orovocal movements, and apneic attacks, they are included in this. And then oral, lingual, facial, these are mostly seen because due to advanced maturation of limbic system. And then EEG is normal in subtle seizures. In sick neonates, amplified EEG monitoring is recommended to detect electrographic only seizures. And then coming to multifocal clonic seizures. First thing is you should know Jacksonian pattern. In case of partial clonic seizures, what happened is there is distal involvement of limb in seizure, and then it moves to proximal and then involved to face, and as a result we can point out from which side the lesion has started. Okay. Whereas in case of neonates, we there is no such type of pattern. Okay, without Jacksonian pattern in this, and then there is predominantly limited to only one side, and it is seen in hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy and birth trauma. Then coming to focal clonic seizures, these are well localized, and can be a manifestation of bilateral cerebral disturbances. Then it is common due to metabolic disorders, birth trauma, and cerebral infarctions. Right-sided clonic seizures are more common due to involvement of left middle cerebral artery. And then coming to tonic seizures. Tonic means stiffening of limbs. Okay. In tonic seizures, similar to decerebrate and decorticate posture is seen. Decerebrate is extension of all four limbs, and then decorticate posture is flexion of upper limbs and then extension of lower limbs. And then it is associated with stertorous breathing is inspiratory breath sounds is heard, and then eye signs or occasional clonic jerks are seen. Then it is associated with intraventricular hemorrhage and kernicterus. Intraventricular hemorrhage is more common in preterms. And then prognosis is very poor for tonic seizures. Then coming to myoclonic seizures. Myoclonic seizures, these are sudden jerky movements due to involvement of a group of muscles, and these are rare in newborns. They are more common in babies with developmental defects including anencephaly. And then in myoclonic seizures, we'll typically see the hypserhythmic EEG and massive myoclonic spasm. It may develop during infancy. And then coming to autonomic seizures. Usually in preterms, what happens is there is cessation of breathing. It is also known as apnea, followed by bradycardia. Okay. And then in case of autonomic seizures, what happens is in term babies also they may manifest with apneic attacks. In this, initially the heart rate can remain normal or tachycardia, followed by bradycardia. And then in this EEG, they may show abnormalities. And next, we shouldn't use respiratory stimulants. Okay, if we use respiratory stimulants, it will worsen the seizure activity. And then in preterms, why apnea is more common? Due to immaturity of respiratory centers, apneas, they are more common in preterms. Okay, if apneas are seen in terms, we should rule out autonomic seizures. Okay, and then coming to causes. Perinatal complications, they constitute to 50% of seizures. Okay, in that birth asphyxia 50, and then intracranial 20, They account for about half of neonatal seizures. And then in the term infant, primary subarachnoid hemorrhage is more common. In subarachnoid hemorrhage, seizures commonly occur on second or third day. Subdural hemorrhages, they are related to large infant size, breech delivery and instrumentation, okay, like forceps delivery or ventrus. Then they are due to tears in the falx, tentorium or superficial cerebral veins. Then convulsive manifestations of intracranial bleed, they appear between 2 and 7 days of age. In the preterm infant, germinal matrix, intraventricular and parenchymal hemorrhages are the prototypic neurological complications of premature hypoxic injury. And then CSF is often bloodstained or xanthochronic, and it can be associated with metabolic complications like hypocalcemia, hypoglycemia, and CNS infections. And then coming to acute metabolic disorders which causing seizures. Okay, so those metabolic disorders are hypocalcemia, hypoglycemia, hypomagnesemia, hypo or hypernatremia. Then coming to hypocalcemia, we should consider only ionized calcium levels. Okay, if ionized calcium levels is unavailable, we have to calculate total calcium. If it is less than 7 milligram per deciliter, we have to deal as hypocalcemia. When ionized calcium in term or premature infants of more than 1500 grams worth is less than 4.4 milligram per deciliter or less than 1.1 millimole per liter, and in premature infants less than 1500 grams at birth, value is less than 4 milligram per deciliter or less than 1 millimole per liter. Most of the hypocalcemia, they are asymptomatic. Hypocalcemia is divided into early onset and late onset. Early onset, they manifest during first 3 days of birth, and then the symptoms of hypocalcemia include jitteriness, stimulus-induced muscle jerks, seizures, and rarely laryngospasm. Then coming to late onset, more than 10 days of life, hypocalcemia because of hypoparathyroidism, feeding of high phosphate formula, DiGeorge syndrome, and some mitochondrial cytopathies and hypomagnesemia. Then coming to hypoglycemia. Okay, the definition of hypoglycemia is controversial. So first 24 hours will take it as less than 40 milligram per deciliter or less than 2.2 millimoles per liter in first 24 hours. And then after 24 hours, less than 50 milligram per deciliter to or less than 2.8 millimole per liter. Most hypoglycemic infants, they are asymptomatic. Symptoms of neuroglycopenia are jitteriness or tremor, hypotonia, alteration of consciousness, poor feeding, apnea, and seizures. And hypoglycemia is seen in preterms, severe IUGR, large for gestational age baby, and then infant of diabetic mother. Causes of neonatal hypoglycemia include the following. First thing is it can be due to decreased glucose supply or increased utilization or disorders in pathways of gluconeogenesis. Okay, disorders in these three can cause hypoglycemia. Okay, so decreased glucose supply seen in premature and small for gestational age infants. And then increased utilization is due to hyperinsulinic states, mostly seen in infant of diabetic mother. Other hyperinsulinic states include overgrowth syndrome, which is known as Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome, erythroblastosis, and the rare hyperinsulinic hypoglycemia. Then coming to disorders in which pathways of gluconeogenesis are deficient or suppressed. These are glycogen storage disorders, amino acidopathy such as maple syrup urine disease, fatty acid oxidation defects. Then coming to infections. Intrauterine infections or neonatal septicemia may be associated with meningitis. Congenital intrauterine infections like TORCH. What is TORCH? TORCH constitutes toxoplasmosis, rubella, cytomegalovirus, herpes, and hepatitis B viruses. Okay. They cause seizures during first 2 days of life. Okay. And then 1/3 of patients with neonatal meningitis, they present with convulsions. It has very good prognosis in long term. And then like older children, we can't see the signs of meningitis in infancy. Okay. Neck stiffness, they are all not seen. Okay. So to rule out meningitis, we have to do lumbar puncture. So in any case of seizure, we have to do LP. Okay. To rule out seizures, and then we have to do CSF analysis. Okay. And then other infection like tetanus neonatal, it is an important cause of spasm. Okay. It should be differentiated from seizures. And then coming to inborn errors of metabolism. When seizures are intractable to therapy, and then if there is a family history of similar disorder in the previous sibling, it should be excluded. Okay. And then there can be history of consanguinity also is there. Okay. And then parental history of in utero may correlate with postnatal seizures and or myoclonus. What is HICO is continuous hiccups. Okay. In utero, when hiccups are there, we should correlate with postnatal seizures and or myoclonus. Okay. And then these inborn errors of metabolism, they appear after introduction of milk feed. Until we start feeding with milk, okay, these symptoms, they won't appear. Okay. Apart from seizures, we have to look for vomiting, severe jaundice, hepatosplenomegaly, malodorous urine, and then virilizations. And then coming to developmental defects. So soon after birth, we have to examine from head to toe. Okay. And then we have to look for any neurological markers. And then we have to assess for facial or caput asymmetry. Okay. And then we have to look for any hypopigmented Ashleaf macules or neurocutaneous markers. Okay. So we should check for microcephaly, hydrocephalus, dysgenesis, microgyria, porencephaly, lysencephaly, hydrancephaly, and agenesis of corpus callosum. Okay. In case of congenital intrauterine infections, we'll see microcephaly, and then ophthalmic and ear problems also we can see. Okay. And then there is calcifications of brain also is seen. Okay. And then close to neurocutaneous diseases, hemangioma in the distribution of cranial nerve type 5 in Sturge-Weber syndrome, and in case of tuberous sclerosis, there is hypopigmented Ashleaf macules. Okay. Sturge-Weber syndrome, they manifest during newborn period, but tuberous sclerosis, they won't manifest in newborn period, only in adulthood they manifest with seizures. And then coming to acute systemic illnesses. When baby is with severe respiratory distress and with septicemia, they are prone to develop seizures. Okay. And then coming to ECMO. ECMO is extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. When baby is sick and then when it is shifted to ECMO, they are more prone to severe hypoxic brain injury. Okay. And then coming to congenital heart diseases. During postoperative period of congenital heart diseases, they are more prone to seizures, and seizures, they are mostly seen during 22 to 24 hours of during post-op period. Okay. Then coming to miscellaneous conditions. Neonatal narcotic withdrawal syndrome. Okay. In this, when baby is born to the mother who is addicted to heroin, morphine, diacetylmorphine, methadone, or alcohol, they may manifest. Okay. Characteristic withdrawal symptoms include irritability, high-pitched cry, tremors, hypertonicity, vomitings, diarrhea, tachycardia after 48 hours of birth. What is the normal heart rate? 100 to 116 newborns. Okay. Bradycardia means less than 90, and then more than 180 is tachycardia. These withdrawal symptoms, they are mediated through release of epinephrine. And then coming to hyperexia, it's also known as stiff person syndrome. It's a rare familial disorder with hyperactive startle, generalized myoclonus, severe hypertonicity, apnea, and bradycardia. There is good response to benzodiazepines, especially clonazepam. And then coming to drug toxicity. Phenothiazine toxicity in the neonate is evidenced by excessive jitteriness, rigidity, and opisthotonus. Phenothiazine is most commonly used in mothers who are suffering with eclampsia. Okay. So as a result of phenothiazine toxicity, these symptoms are seen. Okay. And then other drugs like theophylline, doxaprim, propylene glycol, they can cause seizures in newborn babies. And then accidental injection of local anesthetics during delivery through paracetal blocks they are given. Okay, there is accidental injection of local anesthetic into newborn scalp. Okay, if we examine carefully we can see the needle mark. Okay, in that pupils they are usually dilated and then they are non-reactive to light and all sight phenomena is lost due to external ophthalmoplegia. Then coming to dyselectrolytolemia, both hypo and hypernatremia, they can cause seizures. Okay, as we already discussed these in previous classes in fluid electrolyte balance. Okay, we'll just emphasize on hypomagnesemia now. Okay, when do you say hypomagnesemia? When it is less than 2.1 milligram per deciliter or less than 1.1 millimole. When do you suspect hypoglycemia? If seizures, they are intractable to hypocalcemic therapy, then we should rule out hypomagnesemia. Okay. And then if hypomagnesemia is there, it is they are prone to parathormone hormone resistance. Okay. As a result, unless we supplement magnesium, hypocalcemic seizures, they won't come down. And then coming to pyridoxine dependency. Pyridoxine dependency is a rare autosomal recessive disorder due to involvement of the enzyme in production of inhibitory neurotransmitter GABA. And then when there is prolonged maternal administration of vitamin B6 during pregnancy, they are also predisposed. Then in CSF, the levels of pyridoxal 5-phosphate is low. And then seizure is seen during first 12 hours. This condition should be suspected in an infant having intractable cryptogenic focal seizures with developmental retardation having onset before first 18 months of life. Okay, and irritability, restlessness, crying, and vomiting, they may precede seizures. And then there is a history of severe or fatal cryptogenic convulsive disorder in a sibling with consanguinity among the parents. Okay. And then EEG, it shows generalized bursts of bilaterally synchronous high voltage 1 to 4 hertz activity with interspersed spikes. And then the treatment is pyridoxine 50 to 100 mg IV. And then seizures, they reappear when we withdraw pyridoxine within 3 weeks. Then coming to benign seizures in neonates. These are benign neonatal sleep myoclonus. It is onset during first week of life and it occurs as synchronous myoclonic jerks during REM sleep in preterm babies. When baby is awake, these type of seizures not seen. Okay, and then EEG is normal in this benign neonatal sleep myoclonus, and then seizures spontaneously disappear by 2 months of age. And then coming to benign familial neonatal convulsions, it is a self-limiting, isolated, clonic seizures on second or third day of life, and these are autosomal dominant, and there is spontaneous recovery within 1 to 6 months of age. Then coming to benign idiopathic fifth day seizure. It's also known as fifth day seizures. Okay, these are multifocal clonic seizures, and they occur on day 5 and usually disappear on day 15. Cause is unknown, but low CSF zinc level has been reported in few cases. And then coming to epileptic syndromes, these syndromes they manifest during newborn period. Okay, these are Coppola syndrome. It's also known as malignant migrating partial seizures in infancy. They may present from the first to the 10th month of life. And then in this we can see focal motor seizures, and they escalate aggressively, shifting clinically. Electrographically from side to side and proving highly refractory to anticonvulsant medications. Then developmental status is acutely affected and prognosis for normal outcome is poor. And then coming to Otara syndrome, it's also known as early infantile epileptic encephalopathy. It is associated with very refractory epilepsy. It is characterized by early onset of tonic spasms along with focal motor seizures. Then myoclonus is rare in the early stages of this disorder. It is associated with a burst suppression pattern on EEG, which is relatively invariant. It is more likely to be associated with structural lesions, whereas early myoclonic epilepsy is associated with hyperglycemic levels. And then developmental prognosis is also poor in this syndrome, with many evolving to a chaotic epileptic form pattern known as hips arrhythmic on EEG and accompanied by infantile spasms. And then coming to diagnosis. So whenever we are taking history, we should take antenatal history and then birth history, then family history. Okay, and then we have to note down on which day of life seizures have started. Okay, it varies, and it also gives a simple differential diagnosis for convulsions. So when there is first day of seizures, we have to rule out HIV, cerebral contusion, first day hypocalcemia or early onset hypocalcemia, pyridoxine dependency, and then accidental injection of local anesthetic in fetal scalp. When seizures are seen between 1 and 3rd day, we should rule out intracranial hemorrhage, hypoglycemia, narcotic withdrawal, and inborn errors of metabolism. When seizures are seen in between 4th to 7th day, we should rule out infections, okay? Mostly tetany, meningitis, torch infections. Meningitis, it can be due to E. coli or group streptococcus. And then developmental malformations, kernicterus, and benign neonatal seizures. Then 1 to 4 weeks, we should rule out late onset hypocalcemia, sepsis, progressive hydrocephalus, herpes encephalitis, inborn errors of metabolism, cerebral dysgenesis, and epileptic syndromes. And then seizures with recurrence in siblings. We should rule out inborn errors of metabolism like maple syrup urine disease, hyperglycemias, organic acidemias, proline aminoaciduria, galactosemia, glycogen storage disease, and fructose intolerance. And developmental defects of central nervous system like lissencephaly, porencephaly, and polygyria. Also, they have recurrence in siblings. Then narcotic abstinence or narcotic withdrawal syndrome, pyridoxine dependence, then kernicterus due to rhesus isoimmunization, and then benign familial seizures, they have recurrence in siblings. So what are the first line investigations whenever you see a case of newborn with seizures? First thing is we have to draw blood sample for investigations, and then we have to secure CSF sample, and then we have to check temperature, airway, breathing, and circulation. Okay, so for investigations you should check hematocrit to rule out polycythemia, and then blood glucose to check whether hypoglycemia is there or not. Okay, and then calcium to rule out hypocalcemia, and phosphorus hypophosphatemia, and then magnesium hypomagnesemia, sodium both hypo or hyper, they can cause seizures. Then you should know the pH. First thing is we will take venous blood gas analysis. Okay, if in venous blood gas analysis, if we won't come to any diagnosis, then we have to take arterial blood gas analysis. Okay, and then in this venous blood gas analysis, we have to calculate base excess. Okay, and then we have to do CSF analysis and blood culture. Then we have to do courtside cranial ultrasound or neurosonogram. Okay, and EEG is electroencephalogram. And if seizures, they are recurrent, and then if first line investigations, they won't come in decision of which type of seizures, we have to go for second line. Okay, newborns mostly they are associated with biochemical disorders. Unlike adults, there won't be any idiopathic type of seizures in newborns. Okay, so investigations are non-contrast CT and MRI. First thing is, before going to non-contrast CT and MRI, newborn should hemodynamically, baby should be stable. Okay, we shouldn't be in a hurry to go for investigations. And then coming to serology for torch infections, and then screening tests for exclusion of IM include ABG is arterial blood gas analysis, anion gap, blood ammonia, lactate and pyruvate levels, plasma and urinary amino acid profiles. And then mother's urine and baby's meconium for maternal drug abuse. And then pyridoxine, it should only be reserved as the last resort only, okay, as a therapeutic trial. Then coming to electroencephalography, okay. A conventional 10 to 20 channel continuous EEG for at least 1 hour and concurrent video recording is a gold standard for monitoring seizures in the newborns. Continuous EEG is when we monitor EEG for more than 3 hours. Actually, it's the ideal one, okay. In NIC, we use a 2-channel bedside EEG in combination with amplitude integrated EEG. Automated EEG, it has a low accuracy for seizure detection compared to conventional EEG, and then they may miss low voltage seizures. And then EEG only seizures without a clinical picture of seizures, only EEG seizures are seen. Okay. Then apart from EEG abnormalities, it is important to assess background activity and maturation pattern of EEG. If based on this, we'll assess the prognosis of seizures. Okay. And screenshot of an EEG trace demonstrating seizures. Okay. And then these are some of the characteristic EEG findings. Okay. In maple syrup urine disease, there is 5 to 7 hertz comb-like rhythm is seen. And then in pyridoxine dependency, there is generalized 1 to 4 hertz sharp and slow wave activity is seen. And then in herpes encephalitis, there is multifocal periodic pattern is seen. And then when it is unifocal diphasic spike or sharp wave pattern, it carries good prognosis. Then multiple foci with periods of virtual electrical silence interrupted by bursts of irregular, polymorphic and asynchronous activity or flat EEG carries poor outcome. And then in interictal EEG is normal, it carries a good prognosis. Then coming to management, we should maintain thermoneutral environment for newborn, and then we have to give attention to perfusion and ventilation. We have to assess perfusion by capillary refill time and blood pressure. Then we have to assess SpO2 for ventilation. And then first thing is most common biochemical abnormalities we should look. And then when ECG shows a QTC interval of more than 0.2 seconds or serum calcium less than 7 milligram or serum ionized calcium less than 4, we should correct hypocalcemia. Okay. So the dose is 200 mg per kg of 10% solution, 2 ml per kg loading dose. And then maintenance dose is we should repeat the same dose every 6 to 8 hours under cardiac assessment. Okay, what happens is if calcium gluconate is given rapidly, it causes arrhythmias. Okay, and then 0.2 ml per kg of 50% solution of magnesium sulfate IM, 2 doses 12 hours apart also should be given in case of hypocalcemia. And then coming to hypoglycemia, the blood glucose level we should maintain in between 70 to 120. Okay, so glucose 5 to 10 ml per kg of 10% solution as a bolus, followed by at a rate of 8 mg per kg per minute we should maintain. Then coming to anticonvulsant therapy. So before going to anticonvulsants, we should know the mechanism of anticonvulsants. Okay. First thing is prolongation of sodium channel inactivation by phenytoin, carbamazepine, valproate, lamotrigine, topiramide, zonisamide, lacosamide. Okay. And then facilitation of GABA-mediated chloride channel opening, barbiturates, benzodiazepines, vigabatrin, valproate, gabapentin, and tiazimin. Then inhibition of T-type calcium current by ethosuximide, valproate, and zonisamide. Okay. So first thing is when with the correction of glucose and calcium, if still seizures are present, we have to go for anticonvulsant. Phenobarbital is the drug of choice and it is used since 90 years. Okay. And then the loading dose is 20 mg per kg, and then we should increase and then we should give another 10 mg per kg per dose until it reaches 40 mg per kg. Okay. And then maintenance is after 12 hours 5 mg per kg in BD dose. Okay. And then phenytoin loading dose is 20 mg per kg IV, followed by 5 mg per kg BD or QID. Phenytoin is lipid soluble. Okay. And then coming to, and then it, when it is extravasated, it causes serious skin problems like ulceration and gangrene. Okay. Because of this, fosphenytoin was introduced. Fosphenytoin is water soluble and it has neutral pH, and then it has a vast availability. And then when fosphenytoin, even though it extravasates, there won't be any side effects. Okay, the loading dose is 20 mg phenytoin equivalents per kg IV. Okay. Then coming to benzodiazepines, even if with phenobarbital and phenytoin, if seizures won't control, we have to go for lorazepam. Okay, lorazepam at the dose of 0.05 to 0.1 mg per kg IV. And then diazepam 0.3 mg per kg. Actually, we won't use in newborns. Why? Because it has short duration of action, and then it promotes apneic attacks, and then it causes kernicterus also due to bilirubin displacement from proteins. And then coming to midazolam. Midazolam, it should be given at 0.15 mg per kg bolus, followed by infusion. Okay, starting from 1 microgram per kg per minute. Okay. And then levetiracetam, the dose is 20 to 50 mg per kg. Maintenance is 20 to 80 mg per kg divided BD or TID. And then clonazepam also, it can be used if seizures are intractable. Dose is 100 to 200 mg per kg. It can be given IV over 30 seconds. And then midazolam, it can be given also IM when IV line we are unable to secure. We can give through IM also due to high water solubility. Then paraldehyde in a dose of 200 to 400 mg per kg IV, or in double dilutions through rectum also we can give. Then lidocaine in the dose of 2 mg per kg IV bolus, followed by 6 mg per kg per hour as a constant infusion to abort intractable seizures. Lidocaine, it shouldn't be combined with phenytoin. Okay. If they are combined, it causes serious cardiac arrhythmias. Okay. Then coming to levetiracetam, loading dose is 50 mg per kg IV followed by maintenance dose of 5 mg per kg per hour. TID or BD we can give. Then topiramate is safe in newborn period, but there is no parental formulas for topiramate. Then sodium valproate, the dose is 20 mg per kg oral or IV as the loading dose, followed by 10 mg per kg BD as maintenance dose. Sodium valproate, it causes hepatotoxicity. Okay, so maximum it should be avoided. And then vigabatrin 50 mg per kg per day in neonates with refractory infantile spasms. And then these levetiracetam, sodium valproate, these like add-on drugs, they are most efficacious and then with less side effects. And then this is a flow chart for management of neonatal seizures. First thing is when a neonate with seizures is there, we have to check temperature, airway, breathing and circulation. And then we should secure an IV access. And then we have to check blood glucose, calcium, and then ECG. If blood glucose less than 40, we should go for hypoglycemic correction. And then if QTC interval is more than 0.2 or serum calcium less than 7, we should go for hypocalcemic correction. And then if still seizures persist or there is no response, we have to go for injection phenobarbital. And then even after this, if seizures continues, we have to go for phenytoin or fosphenytoin. Even after this, fosphenytoin and phenobarbital, if seizures persist, we have to intubate and mechanical ventilation. And then we have to give other add-on drugs like lorazepam, lidocaine, and then alternatively midazolam infusion or levetiracetam. If still seizures persist, we have to give like other drugs like topiramate. Okay. Then coming to specific situations, okay, like perinatal complications, the associated metabolic disorders due to SIDH like hypoglycemia, hypocalcemia, hyponatremia, they should be recognized and promptly treated. Okay, we should give IV fluids only 2/3 when SIADH is seen. Okay, and then hypertonic mannitol and furosemide to relieve cerebral edema in term babies with severe hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. There is no role of dexamethasone for relief of cerebral edema. And then selective cooling of brain or total body moderate hypothermia. In this HIE is hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, we have to maintain core body temperature less than 34 degrees. Okay, and then when rewarming is happens, seizures can rarely be seen. Okay, then diuretic therapy and gastric lavage to enhance excretion of inadvertently injected local anesthetic into infant scalp. Then antibiotic therapy, bacterial meningitis, if it is there, it is easily treatable and then it has a very good prognosis. If we start antibiotics, there is clinical improvement in 48 to 72 hours. Then coming to inborn errors of metabolism, we have to stop milk feeding until we find the metabolic defect. And in case of narcotic withdrawal syndrome, we have to give phenobarbital 5 to 8 mg per kg per day in BD dose, or opium or paregoric 2 drops per kg every 4 to 6 hours. Then diazepam, clonidine or chlorpromazine are less effective. And then we have to slowly decrease these doses while when narcotic withdrawal symptoms they are not seen, we can slowly taper these phenobarbital or opium or paregoric drops. And then coming to treatment of pyridoxine dependent seizures. So the dose is 100 mg IV under EEG control. Okay. Then we have to repeat 100 mg IV every 10 minutes till seizures are controlled, or a cumulative dose of 500 mg is given. If IV formulation is unavailable, we have to go for IM route, and in that we have to take 1 ml Eurobion. It provides 50 mg pyridoxine. So we have to give 1 ml each IM in anterolateral aspect of each thigh. Okay. And then if there is no response for this IV formulation, we can give pyridoxine 30 mg per kg per day for 3 consecutive days. Okay. And then the maintenance dose is 5 mg per kg or 50 mg per day, single oral dose daily. And then exchange blood transfusion. Exchange blood transfusion is needed in life-threatening metabolic disorders when there is accidental injection of local anesthetic into the fetus scalp. Then if there is any transplacental transfer of maternal chloropropamide, then kernicterus. Okay. And then we should know until which time anticonvulsant should be given and when to taper and everything. Okay. So the duration of anticonvulsant therapy is guided by neurological status of the infant at discharge time and the cause of the seizures and EG findings. First thing is, at the time of discharge, we have to assess the newborn, if clinical examination and the cause of the seizures, and next if EEG are normal, we can stop phenobarbital. If these are seen, we can discharge with only phenobarbital, and then we have to assess after 1 month. After 1 month, we have to assess the neurological status of the infant, and then we have to do neuroimaging and then EEG. If these are normal, we can taper phenobarbital over 2 weeks. If they are abnormal, we have to again reassess after 3 months. And then even after 3 months, if these are seen, we have to rename them as epilepsy. Okay. In them, if necessary, we can use the same drugs or we can add on other anticonvulsants also. And then coming to prognosis. In prognosis, about only 1/4 of neonates with convulsions only, they will die. Okay. And the prognosis regarding recurrence of seizures and neuromotor sequelae is determined by the underlying disease process and EEG findings. And which type of seizures they have, poor outcome and good outcome, we should know. Okay. Poor outcome is seen in onset of fits within 24 hours of age, presence of myoclonic seizures, and their persistence for more than 48 hours. They carry poor outcome. And then high rate of sequelae are seen in premature births, perinatal hypoxia, birth injury, developmental abnormalities, metabolic seizures, hypoglycemia, and meningitis. Then good prognosis is seen in uncomplicated hypocalcemia, narcotic withdrawal, subarachnoid hemorrhage. Okay. Good outcome is seen when normal interictal EEG is there. And then poor prognosis is seen when flat or periodic and polyphasic EEG is seen. Okay. And then there is overall risk of epilepsy and brain damage among survivors of neonatal seizures is 30 to 40%. And the sequelae of seizures are cerebral palsy and intellectual disabilities. And then references are Mervan Singh 8th edition and then Cloharty Clinical Book of Newborn. Okay. Thank you. Then take home message is, in any case of newborns, if seizures are there, maybe they are only focal. Okay, like generalized tonic seizures, they are not seen, and mostly seizures are subtle type of seizures. Thank you.